I'm going to take a few minutes to discuss some things about my Star BM 9mm surplus pistol that I've recently purchased from J&G Sales. I'm not going to go over already published information on the Star BM. There's plenty of information out there on size, weight, history, and such. I would like to mention a few things that I wish I would have known while I was researching my project. I purchased this pistol with the intent that it would be a practice platform for some gunsmithing techniques that I plan to learn in the future, one being parkerizing, amongst other things. I purposely ordered the lower end model, knowing that right off the bat I was going to be replacing the recoil spring, the magazine springs, the firing pin and the firing pin spring, and the extractor and the extractor spring. So these upgrades seemed obvious to me just because I didn't know the round count of the pistol or how fragile the firing pin was from the previous owner possibly dry firing this gun. So it's currently early 2019, and with these firearms being imported for some time now, there are a few manufacturers actually making new production replacement parts for these guns. Alright, with that being said, I'm just going to run down what it cost to get this pistol to the point where I felt like it was good to go. So after the initial $150 for the pistol itself, I tacked on an extra $20 for an additional mag. The shipping on this was $30. My FFL fee was $20. I spent an additional $33 on new Wolf magazine and recoil springs, which I actually bought a 3-pack of the mag springs, so I have an extra one of those. Another $27 for the firing pin, and another $54 for the firing pin spring, an extractor, and the new extractor spring. So I could have stopped there and the pistol would have been totally reliable and my total would have been $334. But as you can see here, I went out and bought a new set of grips for them, which ran me $42, which bring my total to $376. So when I did get this on my workbench, I broke it down to almost zero. One part that I didn't disassemble was the slide release. I did not take the pin and spring out of the slide release due to the fact that I did not see any of those available for purchase online, and I was afraid of damaging that and then not being able to use the gun. While it was laying disassembled, I also addressed some minor damage that included reshaping the rear of the slide. I sanded some of the rough edges and the machining marks. I did a very detailed cleaning. I replaced all the parts that I had mentioned earlier. I cold blued various parts of the gun and the barrel. I also flattened the face of the trigger, and I shortened the hammer thumb shelf. One thing I will say here is that if you are interested in flattening the face of your trigger like I have here, it makes putting the trigger back in extremely easy. You can put it in from the left hand side of the gun, which has the large opening when you have the grips off, and it slides right into place. I mean, there's no pushing, wedging, prying to get your trigger back in. After reassembling this gun, I took it to the range and proceeded to put 350 rounds downrange. I did end up having one malfunction that I believe was ammo related. I had a round that didn't fire. After clearing that malfunction and rechambering that round, it still did not fire. And something about this gun is that when the hammer falls, it doesn't strike the primer right in the center. It's a little bit off to the side. So I could actually see where both of my strikes were in the primer, and they both look deep. So I'm just going to chalk that up to an ammo-related malfunction. All the ammo that I ran through this was 115 grain Federal full metal jackets. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over some of the differences that I noticed in the new production parts compared to the originals that came out of my pistol. So the first part I want to talk about is the new production firing pin. It's actually a little shorter in overall length than the original that came out of my pistol. The cutout that it's held in place with the pin seems to be a little wider, and the back end of the pin itself seems to be a little shorter. which in turn makes a little less stick out the rear of the slide where the hammer makes contact with it, which didn't seem to make any kind of difference in the function of the pistol. It just concerned me when I seen that it wasn't exactly the same as the original. The next thing I want to mention is the shape of the new production extractor. If you look at it, you can tell it doesn't have the rounded radius on the port end like the original does. Not that that's a big deal. I'm sure you could rework that, re-blue it, and you would never be able to tell. Function wise, it makes zero difference. I had absolutely no issues with the new one. One other thing I'd like to mention about the extractor is that if you look at where the pin goes through it, you can see that the original seems to have a little bit more material on the interior. I don't know if that'll be an issue in the future. I guess time will tell. As far as the new production springs are concerned, the recoil and the magazine springs seem to have the exact same amount of coils on them. The only difference I could see on either one of those was that the magazine springs had a slightly different bend on the top coil that actually went against the follower. Other than that and the original recoil spring being a little bit more compressed, they looked exactly the same. Last thing I'm going to talk about is the cold bluing that I did to this pistol. I was using the Birchwood Casey Super Blue. The alloy that they used in the frame and the slide for this gun actually accepted that super blue quite well. The hardened steel of the hammer actually accepted it the best. The trigger alloy not so much. It took a couple more applications to darken that up. The barrel took it just fine, but after the 350 rounds that I put down range, it did have a couple spots on it that needed touched up. Eventually this will be Parkerized, so this was kind of an experiment to see how using the super blue on larger areas turned out, and I think it turned out quite well. Alright, I think that's going to conclude my content on the Star BM 9mm surplus pistol. I hope it makes a good addition to all the existing content on this firearm, and I hope the next person researching this pistol has a little bit more information than I did. Feel free to leave your questions and comments, and stay safe and God bless.